Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again. I'm going to continue now with Spartacus, the best episodes, part 2. This is a continuation of a breakdown on what I believe to be the best episodes of the entire series. Now in the previous video, the part 1, I already gave some context of what I thought overall over the whole series and how great it was and how I felt it was one of the best series certainly within the last 10 years. So I advise you go and check that video out. And just as a quick warning again, that when I go into these episodes within this breakdown, they will be spoilers. So as I advised in part 1 video, if you haven't seen all of the episodes, all of the series in its entirety, I advise you to stop watching this video now, go back, catch up with all the episodes, and then catch up with this review, because in particular with this breakdown I'm going to be talking about a lot of the finales of the season overall. So that's my just quick overall spoiler warning, so you have been warned. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So we begin this second breakdown with the episode Separate Paths. This is War of the Damned, the 8th episode, and this is really now where we see the final division and split between Crixus and Spartacus. Spartacus has come to the realization that he can't really control anybody who wants to forge their own path, and I think he's just worn down and constantly tired of constantly having to fight with Crixus and argue, because Crixus continually wants to go back and fight the Romans. So we see a further split into the camp, and they have a final assault on the Romans and a gathering together before Crixus forges his own path with his own army. And we get a great kind of reconciliation between both Spartacus and Crixus. They reminisce over all the various disagreements that they had when they were under the house of Beatz, you know, quoting lines that Beatz stated to them in the Blood and Sand era. So just a great final meeting between the two. We also see a very shocking scene when Tiberius raped Caesar, because Caesar was threatening to reveal the fact that Tiberius had raped Core in the earlier episodes. It was just such a shocking scene when I remember watching this for the first time, because you don't expect it. They really rushed the whole development of Crixus building his rebellion and taking on the Roman armies. I think this could have merited maybe a whole entire other episode, maybe even a whole entire arc, that we should have seen multiple episodes of Crixus gaining his forces, pursuing his assault on the gates of Rome. I think it shoehorned this development in, but it was still very spectacular episodes on here, great battle scenes, and we get the very sad scenes where we see Crixus finally fall to his doom. Naevia is getting caught on, she has a sword to her neck, and she has to watch tragically as he sees Crixus get beheaded, and we get that great kind of visual shot and heightened music and emotional as we see Crixus get beheaded in her eyesight. And it's just fantastic, tragic, because obviously we've been through Crixus throughout the whole season. We've seen his development on here as a beginning brute and antagonist to more of a favourite character. So the next episode we go on to is Enemies of Rome, and this was the premiere episode of War of the Damned, and this is now where we see, following the finale of Vengeance, we see Spartacus' rebellion, and they've now amassed into thousands, and they go around terrorising the Romans. And we have a great opening battle scene where we really now see they've become fully fledged warriors and a true uprising that the Romans are afraid of. A lot of people now see Spartacus as a true god. Spartacus now had to look towards the preservation of his people, and we see various scenes where he's looking at the famine of the people and how they're struggling for land, they're struggling for food. And this was really the beginning of that dynamic that where we see the split between Crixus and Spartacus, where obviously Crixus wants to go on and fight in the Romans, and as I said, Spartacus now wants to preserve the existence of his people. So what was also most notable about this episode, of course, is that we had the introduction of Crassus, the latest antagonist of the series, and they went for a much more likeable, honourable take. I know if you've seen the Stanley Kubrick movie starring Kirk Douglas and Laurence Olivier, Crassus is much more of a cold, calculating personality, but they wanted to go for something different here and make Crassus as much more of a man of integrity and honour, where we see Crassus training with the gladiator. We see At the end of this episode, of course, the famous Crassus grab maneuver. If your opponent drives at you with a sword, you grab their sword with both hands, you grab it off them, and you turn around and you stab your opponent in the stomach. And the notion here is that the maneuver or the strategy is about patience, waiting for your opponent to strike first, and then you make the move overall. And again, just a fascinating insight into Crassus and what he stands for. So fascinating insight, a great episode, great action at the beginning. Liam McIntyre firmly established himself as Spartacus, and a great introduction into Crassus as the main antagonist. We go on to the next episode now, and that is Reckoning. And this is the 5th episode from Gods of the Arena, and following the events from Beneath the Mask where Guy was murdered, we see Batiatus and Lucretia now. They're exiting the Ludus because, as Titus, their father, he found out about the party that they hosted, and following Guy's murder, he realised now that if he wants to set Quentin on proper path, he has to dissolve his marriage from Lucretia. So of course Batiatus, he won't do that, so he sides with Lucretia and they expect to leave. Prior to this, Titus holds a tournament amongst all the gladiators to see who is amongst the most worthy, despite the fact that Gannicus is the title as the champion. Titus isn't convinced about his true nature, so he holds a tournament. And this is fantastic because we get some great choreography, fight scenes here. We see the various fighters, it's lots of slow-mo, and we see the clashing of the sticks and the clashing of the shields as the dust spreads over the fighters' faces. We see the blood pouring off their mouth, all these cool slow motion shots as we see the fighters take on one another in the tournament. It's all great, and of course this is a further progression of Crixus, and we see his ongoing prominence to rise above the gladiators. We see now how he amasses constant victories. We get the further subplot of the intensifying romance, if you like, between Gannicus and Melita. It's a romance as such. I think it was more on Gannicus' side. I think Melita was just more of maybe a sexual attraction, and the fact that Gannicus was more of a symbol of somebody who didn't have much love for the Ludus, whereas Oenomaus, as we saw in previous scenes between them, he sees the Ludus as the foundation of his life, and Melita really wants to get away from it. So I think that was really what drew her more to Gannicus, rather than the fact that she was in love with him. We see the final matchup between Crixus and Gannicus, and this is another fantastic battle. I love all the kind of slow motion shots where we see Crixus sliding on the floor and we see Gannicus kind of pirouetting and spinning over. This is great. What was most noteworthy of this episode, of course, was that we get the final revelation that Lucretia has actually been poisoning Titus with the honey wine, because we see throughout the last couple of episodes that Titus has been coughing, and they blamed it on the heat within Capua, but it's actually no, it was down to Lucretia. And we get that great revelation where he's at the bedside and Lucretia reveals her true intentions and her true thoughts. And this was great writing and a great kind of twist and turn here. And then we get this great sequence where we intercut with the scene between Gannicus and Melita as they has their final night of passion, and then we see that they both drinking the honey wine as well. So Melita succumbs to the poisoned wine as well as Titus does, and we get this really kind of freaky kind of piano kind of music that we cut in between the two. It's really quite a startling sequence, and it's fantastic. It's very intense, and it was very shocking at the time if you're watching for the first time, seeing two characters die at the same point. Just a great edited sequence, and I love the final moments of this episode where we get the slow motion shots as when Batiatus and Oenomaus, they return from their search to find the herbs to cure Titus, and we get that slow motion sequence and great music where we see the fact that they both reflect on the fact that both Melita and Titus have both died, and it's just a great sequence, great music, and it also holds huge ramifications going ahead for the finale. So just a fantastic episode, great performances all alike, well acted, well staged, and great action and choreography alike. So the next episode we go on to is Revelations, and this is the 12th episode from Blood and Sand, and we go back now. Here we see the return of Glaber, because throughout the whole season, remember, he was the beginning antagonist when Spartacus defied him within his artillery, and he was the one that gave Suri away. And of course, he spent a bit of time away, and that's when Batiatus took over as the main villain, and then Glaber has come back. and this has continued the ongoing arc when Batiatus is continuing to look to gain favour. So Glaber comes back now, and Alethea is truly against him because of the fact that, of course, Lucretia has knowledge of the fact that she killed Lykania, who is the cousin of Marcus Crassus, and so Alethea asks Glaber to kind of entertain their thoughts of ambitions and then just dismiss them. So we have the meeting, and of course Glaber now, this is where we see him encounter Spartacus again, and he's surprised because he sees now how much more controlled and composed a personality that Spartacus was, and this fascinates and attracts Glaber. So he holds a kind of contest to see what other tricks that Spartacus has learned. Batiatus thinks this is just an exhibition, but no, the Roman soldiers are actually going to use swords, and Spartacus only has practice swords. And this is again one of the best, I think, fight sequences throughout the whole series, where we get a great scene here where we see Spartacus take on all of Glaber's Roman soldiers, and I love this kind of choreography fight scene. He's standing in the middle, and we get a great tension and the music, and we get close-ups of all the people watching, and then we see the Romans come at it one at a time. Nice mix between actual action and slow motion as we see them clash with Spartacus. Spartacus falls down on the water, and we see the slow motion, and then he gets back up, and then he just goes all out and attacks them all and brutally beats them all down. And this is when he proves that he is the champion of Capua, and this attracts Glaber to get him to submit. And this is all of course by design, so that Batiatus can gain patronage from Glaber, and which he does. So at the time, Batiatus thinks this is all good, this is all going great, and then we get the revelation, of course, that Naevia, who, as we all know, is in a current relationship with Crixus, has now been promised to Asher following his deeds in deception and murdering both the magistrate and Salonius for the previous episodes. So once Crixus sees Naevia with Asher, he goes completely mad in a rage, and he beats him up, and then Glaber, this is what convinces him not to attach his patronage to Batiatus. He walks away, and then Batiatus turns around and then shows him the hand of Lykania, and then that's when we get the revelation that it was Alethea that killed her, and the fact that Glaber, of course, this threatens his position as praetor, and he looks at Alethea and he realizes, yes, Alethea did murder her, so he dismisses her and grants patronage, and Alethea has to remain in Capua. And then we get the final development, of course, where Crixus is flogged because of the revelation and the fact that now Batiatus has patronage, and he deems that he's been too favourable with all the gladiators, so he intends that he's going to be more strict. And we get the great other revelation that he's known all the time about Lucretia's secret meetings with Crixus. We get that final quote from Spartacus when he shows his true intentions to escape from the Ludus, and he delivers that famous line, "Kill them all." So great episode, fantastic action, fantastic fight sequences, I like on it. We then segue into the finale of Blood and Sand, which is Kill Them All. And this is everything coming to a halt now, where we now see Spartacus working with the gladiators to plan their escape and get his eventual revenge on Batiatus. He of course has to convince Crixus, who still has antagonism towards him. They eventually come to a compromise and agree that whoever survives the battle or the escape plan, if they do break free, then one of them will continue their search for Naevia, so they find a common ground. Batiatus holds a final celebratory party for the fact that he's gained patronage, and we see Spartacus and Crixus fighting, and this is when they want to convince each other. And then at the end, they find a common ground. They perform that famous maneuver where Crixus taps the shield and Spartacus jumps on the shield, tries to kill Batiatus. He ends up stabbing, I think it's one of the magistrates, and all hell breaks loose. The gladiators break free, and it's just blood splatters everywhere. It's just pure carnage, and it's truly exciting, it's truly thrilling, and we just see all the Romans, whether it's men, women, children, they're, you know, no one is gonna survive this, and we get great edited shots, and we see just the gladiators just running riot, and we get these close cuts where we cut to dark or cut to black and then cut to red, and then we see blood splattering over the walls, blood splattering all over the floor, and it's all fantastic on here. We see where Lucretia is trapped and we get that really intense scene where we see Crixus fatally wounding Lucretia, because again he's angry that Naevia got sent away. We also get the development of Onomaus catching up with Asher. He of course was responsible for Barker's death. So we get all these kind of little subplots really coming to a halt amidst the carnage, and it's all fantastic. It's a great episode, it's a great finale, just fantastic, and it all culminates of course in Spartacus finally getting his revenge against Batiatus. And I was sad at the time because I thought John Hannah as Batiatus was just brilliant. For me, as I mentioned in part one of the truly great villains currently within television at the time when this show was being aired. He was brilliant in this role, and I was kind of sad because I thought, well, we're not going to get Batiatus again. Now, we did of course get him to come back for the prequel series Gods of the Arena, so another kind of victory lap for John Hannah. But yes, just culminating in a great conclusion to Blood and Sand. Spartacus makes a speech and then they all exit and we see the final shot of Spartacus. So an exceptional finale, truly brilliant, and this would be something that the series would really prove itself throughout the whole entirety of its run, just producing these great premiere episodes and these absolutely outstanding finales. Kill Them All is a great example of that. We then go on to another exceptional finale, and that is Wrath of the Gods. This was the episode 10, the season finale of Vengeance, and another truly exceptional finale as we see Spartacus and his forces gather around on Mount Vesuvius, playing again to the historical accounts of what actually happened, and they're now waiting for Glaber's assault on them. We get an early attack on the forces and see a lot of the main characters that have been prominent throughout the whole season of Vengeance meet their death. The first one of these was Myra, when she gets an axe, where I think one of the axes is going to get thrown at Spartacus and she jumps on the way on there. And I was very sad because first of all, Katrina Law as Mira was great, stunningly beautiful of course, and yeah, I didn't expect Mira to die so quickly. So we get other developments where Asher's aspirations fall apart because we know he has been abusing Lucretia, and Lucretia works with Olivia to get Glaber to turn against Asher, and we find out of course that his lieutenants, the kind of vicious group of soldiers that he's assembled, they don't really have much devotion to him. They just go where the highest price is. So they abandon him, and he has one more chance to prove his worth, where he has to go and deliver a message to Spartacus's forces. And this is where we get a kind of prolonged story where involving Naevia, and we get the final confrontation between Asher. He thinks he's walked away, but they don't let him off, and Naevia really, this is a culmination of her character because we know she's been abused by the Romans when they were searching for her, and this is her really getting her sense of true purpose and her validation back by taking on Asher. And it's seemingly that Asher's got the upper hand, but no, Naevia strikes the final blow towards him, and I love the kind of euphoric and emotional music that we get on there as Naevia strikes the final blow, decapitating Asher. It's a great thrilling moment, and then we get fantastic action as we get the final confrontations between Spartacus and Glaber's army as they catch them by surprise. And this episode was also very stunning because we get now the final confrontation between Lucretia and Olivia, and there's been a back and forth that they were playing throughout the whole entire season, and we get that great scene where Olivia is seemingly going to go and kill Lucretia, and then her water breaks and she's going to have the baby due, and then we get a really gruesome development where Lucretia cuts the baby from Olivia's womb. And I can remember watching this episode for the first time, I actually thought Spartacus, because it's a show that doesn't shy away from violence or abrasive nature, I actually thought they were going to show her cutting her womb. Thankfully it didn't, but still a very shocking and cruel development. And then we get the real revelation where we see Lucretia standing on the edge of the wall holding a baby, reminiscing on the fact that she was pregnant, remember, and that her and Quintus were going to have a son together, and that he was going to be the future of their ruling over the Ludus. And then she jumps off the cliff with the baby, and it's a truly shocking development because you don't really see it coming. It's a brilliant performance from Lucy Lawless because you're really thinking, where is the development going, where are they heading with this? And yep, a shocking development. And then the whole trauma of that experience is just too much for Olivia to take, and we see her succumb to her wounds, and then she dies on the floor. So just a shocking climax. And then we get the final development here where we see the battle intensifying as Oenomaus dies because he succumbs from his wounds, where he got his eyes impacted by the Egyptian, and then Spartacus finally kills Galaba at the end, and then that's where we see the armies rise to further prominence. So just an amazing finale for me, really cementing Spartacus's status as one of the great series of television at the time. We go on to the bitter end, and this is the finale of Gods of the Arena, the 6th episode. We picked up from the previous episode, Reckoning, where following Batiatus' father's death, Batiatus now wants the revenge, or the perceived revenge, because they think it was Tullius that caused his father's death for the poisoning of the honey wine, where it was actually Lucretia, of course, but we don't know that. And we get a fantastic final encounter in the street between Batiatus' gladiators, and they take on Tullius's men, and it's a great sequence in the kind of street corridor. And I love all the quick editing as we see the people stabbing and punching each other on here. Again, Spartacus does this a lot, where we get these slow motion shots of the punches and kicks and the teeth being punched out of people's mouths. Fantastic on here, and it's great to see Batiatus actually getting involved in the fighting. And they conclude this where they take Tullius into the open arena, which is getting constructed, and we get the final revelation, and they put him in the walls, and we get a vicious scene where they stab him. So that was a great arc on there. And of course, now with that revelation dealt with, we come on to the main action set piece, and that is the opening of the arena, and we get a spectacular sequence where we see the gladiators of Batiatus take on the gladiators of Salonius. And this is following the development that originally Batiatus and Salonius had worked together to outmaneuver Tullius, and they would agree to split the share of the gladiators between their own ludices. But Salonius tricks him and maneuvers himself so he has the sole control, or the majority control, of the gladiators. This culminates in a just brilliant sequence on here where we see the gladiators in a ring of fire, and it's about 15-20 minutes of pure carnage. This is one of those kind of moments where you sit back and you get your popcorn and you just enjoy a really thrilling battle royale kind of pay-per-view style event, as we see all the gladiators involved take on one another on there. And we see Crixus and Gannicus and Dagon and Asher. There are so many standout moments on here. They really went all out to make sure this is an epic piece of television. And then we see Gannicus take on the big soldier at the end, and then we get that brutal kill. And I can remember being shocked at the time when Gannicus strikes him down, and then he puts a sword in his mouth and he just dislocates his jaw. It's such a gruesome, thrilling kill on there, and it's fantastic. And again, this is the show really going balls out to the wall and showing what an amazing, thrilling and spectacular show it is. This is a just incredible finale. And then we get to the end, of course, where we see Gannicus emerging victorious. He gains the freedom. I love the music as it plays as Gannicus gives his departures and his farewells between all of the soldiers, and he says goodbye to Oenomaus. Very touching moment, especially when you know what went on between Gannicus and Melita. Just a brilliant conclusion to a brilliant series. We go on to the final episode with this breakdown, which for me is truly, I believe, the best episode of the entire series. And of course, we go to victory, and this of course is the series finale, the 10th episode with War of the Damned. And this is where we come to it at last, just the epic conclusion of the series. One of the greatest television finales for me for a series from what I've seen. You know, you may argue against me, of course it's subject to opinion because nobody has seen every single television show. We begin, of course, with a great montage as Spartacus now and his army, they begin to make the final stand. We get a great montage where we see various characters of his remaining forces killing Romans, and of course saying I am Spartacus again, just furthering that myth, that concept that everybody says they're Spartacus, so you have no idea who he is. A reference, of course, to the Kirk Douglas movie where we have that iconic scene, of course, where everybody claims to be Spartacus. So fantastic montage on here. We get a final, or one of the final scene between Spartacus and Gannicus, just showing a reflection of what goes on and the future and what lies ahead if they win and what happens if they lose. Just great context. And really it was all about the final battle, and it was just something truly magnificent, truly exceptional. This was cinematic standard. This truly was. This was bringing you back to those epic battle sequences that we saw in the Lord of the Rings movies, in Gladiator, in Braveheart, in Last Samurai. Just truly epic. I think the whole action must go on for about a good 25-30 minutes as we see Spartacus's army adopt various tactics and strategies as they take on the superior numbers of the Roman army. There's those great sequences when they're walking along the ground and then the ground kind of submerges and we see them throwing fireballs and everything as they take on the Roman forwards. It's just truly jaw-dropping stuff, and in typical Spartacus fashion, we see various characters that we've grown a big attachment to, we've grown to know and love, just meeting their deaths, and it's just all done in such a brutal fashion as we see the likes of Sibyl and Naevia just getting constantly stabbed and attacked on here, and it's just really brutal stuff. It's just hard to watch, because I love how we see Spartacus just taking on forces, get that slow motion shots of Liam just running at the Roman soldiers. We see of course Gannicus fighting off all the soldiers and gets surrounded by loads of Romans. They take on a kind of phalanx formation, and it's not that Gannicus is not good enough, he just can't take many people on. It's just too many of them. They're just fighting him off left, right and centre, and he just succumbs to just exhaustion because he's overwhelmed. And then we get to the final scene of course where we see Spartacus and Crassus in just an exceptional fight sequence, and it all comes to a halt where we see those great slow motion shots on here where we see Spartacus and Liam's facial expressions as he's striking down each blow, and as he strikes down each blow in slow motion, we cut back to all the people that he's come to know over the entire series, and then we get that really tense moment where Crassus, as we saw at the beginning of this season with the Enemies of Rome episode, he looks to perform that Crassus grab maneuver where he grabs the sword and he pirouettes around, and we think he's going to kill Spartacus, but then Spartacus grabs the sword back, takes it from him and strikes him down. And I can remember watching this episode for the first time because, as we know, Spartacus pulls no punches and it's constantly putting twists and turns and surprising you. And I actually thought at this point they were actually going to pull a big switcheroo and actually have Spartacus live and kill Crassus, but they did it in the end. He gets stabbed, he gets wounded, and this is when of course he really succumbs to his wounds, and it's really just really emotional stuff. And we get that great scene of course where we see Spartacus finally succumbing to his death, and we've seen the rain falling as he dies, and of course this is referring back to that concept that he is the bringer of rain. And it's just fantastic, great emotion, brilliant performance from Liam McIntyre, just an exceptional finale. For me, the best episode of the entire series, exceptional finale for an exceptional series, one of the best television series certainly within the last 10 years, and I've struggled to find another television finale that's matched this one. But so that wraps up now the conclusion of my breakdown of the best episodes of Spartacus. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with my choices? Do you not agree with them? Are there other episodes within this series that you feel merit recognition and merit mention? Let me know what you think in the comments. But those are my overall thoughts on the breakdown of the best episodes of Spartacus. So that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.